Hello, and welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Johanna Munson, and I am the worship associate for our virtual service today, alongside our minister, Zachary Vinson. Before we start, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Coast Salish tribes, the homelands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Chimacum people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm Indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship and ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take time either now or later in the service to make a contribution to help sustain Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, and in the beauty of whom and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always, with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. Restorative justice. When I hear these words, I think of how diametrically opposite to this theory is the operation of our prison system. Restorative justice involves engaging the victim and the perpetrator in dialogue, guided by trained professionals in an effort to repair the relationship. It is a constructive response to wrongdoing within a community, but focused on that relationship. It allows the victim to give full expression to how the actions of the perpetrator affected their existence as a human being in relationship to themselves and to others. The perpetrator has the chance to experience the impacts on the victim, and through guided discussions has an opportunity to apologize and make reparations to the extent possible. This leads me to the huge question of why is there so much crime to start with, which takes me down the rabbit hole of the social justice inequalities that color American history from the very beginning. Dehumanization, although a concrete historical fact, is not a given destiny, but the result of an unjust order that engenders violence in the oppressors, which in turn dehumanizes the oppressed. That's a quote from Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. U.S. prisons, and to a surprisingly large extent our schools, operate on the principle that committing a crime or breaking a school rule should be punished by isolating the perpetrator and removing them from most sources of support. The expectation is that serving that sentence will result in the rehabilitation of the offender. And when the sentence is over, the person will re-enter society or the classroom repentant and able to reintegrate. Experience shows us that this is rarely the case for many reasons, which are deeply embedded in the punitive justice system, which dates back to 1700 BCE. Recidivism in the US, going back to jail within a year, is about 44%, believe it or not. And don't get me started on for-profit prisons. Archbishop Desmond Tutu was a famous advocate for the shift from punitive to restorative justice. He wrote, "True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, and the truth." And then, a broken person needed to be helped to be healed. For me, the real work of restorative justice needs to begin with addressing root causes of crime, such as poverty, discrimination, racism, and economic barriers that enrich a few at the expense of the majority. I feel hopeful that new policies are in the pipeline that will at least attempt to level the playing field and provide a more nurturing society where every one of us is recognized for the soul that we are. The desire to feel wanted and to be seen begins with our first breath. On this Mother's Day, may we recognize that nurturing each other so that we may fully come into our own power is the way to peace and justice. I dedicate the lighting of this chalice to awakening the compassion that lies within each one of us.
As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat each other kindly, as we are all one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness, because that is how we can all become the best that we can be.
Before continuing into the rest of our service today, I wanted to take a moment and, for all of you who celebrate, wish you a happy Mother's Day. I know that Mother's Day can be a complicated holiday, depending on our relationship to our own mother, or those of us who have children, maybe the relationships that we have with them. And so for those of you who celebrate, happy Mother's Day. And for those of you who this is a tender or conflicted holiday, please know that I am holding you in my heart and wishing you peace on this day. Another thing I want to mention is something that was brought to my attention by Dean and Pat Sampson this last week. And that is that Bloodworks Northwest is asking people who qualify to donate blood to consider donating blood. Blood supplies in our region are at an emergency low level, And with many people needing life-saving treatments, we've been asked to encourage people to consider donating blood to help ease this crisis a little bit, and know that your donation could help save a life. I also just wanted to say thank you to everyone who showed up at last Sunday's social hour at the Sage parking lot. We had 50-some people who showed up during the time that we were there, and it was a beautiful day and provided us a chance to begin reconnecting in person after over a year of virtual church. We're looking forward to hosting other such events in the coming months, so please be on the lookout for more opportunities for us to gather in person over the summer and into the fall. And with that, I'd like to invite us fully into this space of worship, to take a deep breath, and center ourselves with these words by the poet Wendell Berry. We clasp the hands of those that go before us, and the hands of those who come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms, and the larger circle of lovers, whose hands are joined in a dance, and the circle of all creatures, passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance, to a music so subtle and vast that no ear can hear it except in fragments. And so may we join with those, both seen and unseen, who are woven into the web of life as we come together this day to worship. Come, let us worship together.
Hello. Today I want to tell you a story that comes to us from southern Nigeria, and I learned about it from the website World of Folktales. So in this story, there are two women, and the first woman is a poor woman who has come to a new village from far away. This woman is so poor that after paying for her tiny apartment, all she can afford to eat every day is one meal of eba. Now, eba is a staple in Nigeria. It's made of kavasa root, and it's very filling, but it doesn't taste very good. But it's what the woman could afford, and so every day that's what she had. She had a bit of eba. Now, one day, as the woman was eating her eba, she realized she smelled something really, really good. And she realized that one of her new neighbors was making egusi soup, which is another staple of Nigeria, which is full of beans and different kinds of protein and lots of delicious tasting herbs. And so the poor woman followed her nose, and she thought, I could just ask my new neighbor if I could just have a bit of soup for my eba. It would taste so much better with just a bit of egusi soup. And so she found the smell and she knocked on the door. Knock, knock, knock. And the woman opened the door and she glared at the woman. "What do you want?" And the poor woman said, "I was wondering if I could have just a tiny bit of your agusi soup for my Ebba." And the woman said, "I'm not sharing my agusi soup. If you want agusi soup, make it yourself." And she closed the door. This happened a lot to the poor woman, and she thought, well, I tried. And so she went back and she finished her Ebba without any soup at all. The next day, though, she realized that if she went outside at dinner time, she could smell the aroma of the agusi soup, and it made her Ebba taste better just by the smell. And so that is what she did. After a long day at work, she would come home, get her bowl of Ebba, and sit outside and smell the soup. The woman who made the soup did not like this at all. At all, at all, at all. And every day she would see the woman outside eating her Ebba, smelling her soup. And it made her so angry. She tried glaring at the woman, and nothing happened. She tried shaking her finger at the woman. Nothing happened. She tried yelling at the woman, "Stop stealing my soup smell." Nothing happened. She tried closing her windows to keep the aroma inside, but it was just too hot to do that. So she had to let the aroma back out into the world, where she thought, that woman is stealing my smell. Finally, one day, the soup maker could take it no more. And she went to the local judge and she explained the situation. "This woman is stealing the aroma of my soup every single day," she explained to the judge. "She sits outside, she doesn't help at all, and she just steals the smell as she eats her Ebba." The judge nodded. "This is a problem," she said. "She must be punished appropriately." And the soup maker smiled, and she went and she grabbed up the villager, her neighbor, and she said, "You have to come in to the judge because you are going to be punished for stealing my soup smell." The poor woman sighed. The world did not always work well for people who didn't have much money, but she couldn't imagine why she should be punished for smelling something that was out in public. But the soup maker was insistent, and so the poor woman came in, and the judge listened to them both as they told their stories. And the judge said, "It is true, you have taken the aroma of this woman's soup, and you must be punished appropriately." The poor woman was so nervous. What was going to happen? She was going to be punished for smelling. It got worse. The judge reached back, took out a big stick, and handed it to the soup maker. The poor woman gasped. Was she going to be hit for smelling the soup? The judge said, "Soup maker, you are right. This woman has taken the smell of your soup. And so, as an appropriate punishment, you may hit her shadow 40 times. And the judge handed the woman the stick. Well, the soup maker took the stick and felt incredibly foolish. Hit the woman's shadow. The punishment made the soup maker realize that she had been behaving terribly. So she put down the stick and she walked over and she apologized for what she had done and for not sharing in the first place. And she said to the poor woman with her Ebba, I am happy to share a bit of soup with you. Come by whenever you'd like, and I'll fill up your bowl. And that is my story.
Before I offer the words of prayer that I have selected today, I wanted to pause and ask each of you to hold the members in our community in your thoughts, your prayers, your heart and mind, especially those who have experienced loss in the past week, those who have experienced poor health and are needing medical treatment. I'm not going to list the names because it feels a little strange to share names in this virtual space that exists out in the internet forever and without consent. But for those of you who are going through things in this community, who have shared in email or through text message with me, know that I am holding you in my mind, in my heart, and ask the rest of the community to do the same. For more information on those people I am speaking of, please join us after the service for our Zoom coffee hour, where we'll share our joys and sorrows together and find out how we can be of emotional and material support to one another. And with that, I invite you into our spiritual moment with these words by Reverend Karen G. Johnston. Ancestors who spoke with bravest fire, lend us your senses, that we may know another world, that another world is on her way, breathed into life with our participation in her creation. Forebearers who led the way where there was, at first, no way, lend us your persistence, your temerity, your assurance that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend toward justice. Ones who went before us, sacrificing for a future not your own, help us to give of ourselves, that common stones in our hands today might be cathedrals of compassion today, halls of restorative justice tomorrow, sheltering walls of beloved community the day after. It is Sunday morning, the day we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before, yet are ever in our midst. May this prayer guide us this day and in the days ahead. Amen. I've always loved the word indemnification, to be indemnified, or to secure against hurt, loss, or damage, or alternately, to be made whole. It's usually a word that you only hear when in reference to contracts or insurance companies. But for some reason, this word has always felt sacred to me, indemnification. There's something about this word that resonates with the work that Unitarian Universalists seek to do in the world, to repair the damage that has been done and further secure against hurt and loss, to make tangible our interconnection in a way that brings a restored understanding of our wholeness. This understanding of indemnification is also the aim of many other organizations, especially organizations seeking to reform our criminal justice system. Organizations who make use of a process known as restorative justice. When approached through this lens of restorative justice, the aim of the criminal justice system emphasizes repairing the harm caused by criminal behavior, rather than simply punishing it. Such an approach to crime and rehabilitation often acknowledges the perpetrator of a criminal act as the first victim in any crime. Sounds a bit weird at first. And though this acknowledgement seeks to heal the wound in the perpetrator, and through this acknowledgement seek to heal the wound in the perpetrator that caused them to commit the crime in the first place. If we think of this in terms of the story that Catherine shared earlier, we can see how such an understanding of woundedness works. In the case of the woman in the story who stole the sniffs of soup, it was her hunger that caused her to do this. It caused her to commit what the woman making the soup perceived as a crime. In making the comparison between this woman and the understanding of woundedness I mentioned, we can learn to see how her hunger is the wound that caused her to steal the sniffs of soup in the first place. Sure, this is a rather silly example, stealing sniffs of soup. But silliness aside, you can see how the circumstances of the woman's life put her in a situation where her choice to steal was valid. She was hungry. A similar situation is often considered in the area of philosophy concerned with morals and ethics. In this situation that moral philosophers consider, the following premises are put forth for people. Premise number 1, we have a moral obligation not to steal. Premise number 2, we have a moral obligation to feed our family. In this example, these two premises are explored in a situation where a parent of a family, a mom or a dad or a parental guardian, finds themselves in a predicament where they do not have enough money to feed their family. And as a result, they go and steal a loaf of bread. This theft creates a contradiction in which the moral edict not to steal exists in tension with the moral obligation to feed one's family. If the parent hadn't gone out and stolen the bread, their family would have gone hungry, which is also a morally wrong situation. For philosophers, this contradiction is oftentimes neutralized by applying a certain philosophy called utilitarianism. And the utilitarian approach to a situation says that we should always act in a way that brings about the most utility, or the greatest good for the most people. In the utilitarian view, stealing one loaf of bread brings about more good and creates a situation in which a person is morally justified in stealing a loaf of bread, or, in the case of Catherine's story, sniffs of soup. If we turn back to the idea of restorative justice and the notion that the perpetrator of a crime is the first victim, we might see how life circumstances cause certain behaviors. For both the parent and the woman who stole the sniffs of soup, the circumstance of hunger caused them to take the action that they did. For both perpetrators, you could say they were the victims of capitalism. For they both lived in a community where there was enough to eat, and yet, because of lack of funds, were not given access to food. I think this is also true at times of crime beyond stealing bread or sniffs of soup as the examples we've considered put forward. It's my belief that people commit criminal acts because of a need that isn't being met in their lives, or an event that left someone with a painful wound at the center of their being. It's not always hunger. It could be want of attention or connection. Perhaps unaddressed trauma or past abuse. As a result of any one of these circumstances, individuals often lash out. It's also my belief that this is the cause of behavior, that we call criminal. A sort of perpetuation of the things that have been done to us, or a way of seeking to meet an unmet, basic, yet essential need. A need for food or attention, or any number of other things. This is what is meant by the idea that the perpetrator of a criminal act is the first victim in any crime. That something in their life has caused them to have hurt in a way that they further perpetuate the same hurt. And recognizing this, proponents of the restorative justice approach seek to heal such wounds and facilitate a process in which wholeness can be restored and an end to the damage can be brought about. Practices and programs reflecting this restorative approach try to respond to criminal acts by first identifying what it would mean for the situation to be repaired. What steps would need to be taken to make things whole again? By second, involving the shareholders, by bringing the perpetrator and the victim together and facilitating a process in which reconciliation or restoration can be sought. And by three, transforming the traditional relationships between community, their governments, and those who are committing crimes. That its restorative justice encourages people to engage in a relationship building process, that it seeks mutual healing. The goal of restorative justice isn't about punishment, but rather repair. Restorative processes hope to bring about healing and acknowledge that you can't undo what was done, but you can move forward in a commitment to make things better. It's about creating communities where people feel connected and through this connection are able to move forward together. This idea of justice runs counter to much of our current legal system, a system that oftentimes isolates people and breaks relationships and arguably causes more harm in the pursuit of what has been labeled justice, which feels kind of silly and reminds me of the punishment that the woman in the story Catherine shared received for her crime of stealing sniffs of soup. A punishment of 40 whacks to her shadow. In terms of what this means for us as individuals and a church community, two things come to mind for me. The first is that we can play, as a people of faith, a very important role in advocating for processes that aren't aimed at penalization, and advocate for processes instead that seek restoration. To work to call into question practices that have been proven to be ineffective, and advocate for new alternatives that are aimed at making whole what has been broken. To seek repair rather than throwing things away. But beyond this, I think more importantly, each of us has a chance to practice this sort of restorative justice in our own lives. We all have been hurt, let down, or even abused. Or maybe from our own place of hurt, we have gone and lashed out at people, or acted in ways that might be ethically questionable. I know I'm not perfect. I've had my moments where I have been unnecessarily mean, or gotten frustrated at something that really someone was just asking for help. And my response was to push them away or to further compound the confusion. We all could bring some of this restoration into our relationships with each other, with our family and friends and members of this community. To play a part in beginning to heal those wrongs that we have inflicted or that have been inflicted on us by acknowledging the role that we have played. I will say too, it's true that not every relationship can be repaired, or frankly should be repaired. I think of the example of being abused, for instance, or assaulted. That relationship might be beyond repair. And that's a reality sometimes. But not all of the hurt and pain we have experienced is beyond repair. And when we find those places where we can seek that restoration, it's a chance for us to begin to practice restorative justice. To exercise this impulse like you might with a muscle. It's like lifting weights. We need to use it to strengthen it. And so I invite each of you in the days ahead to take some time, pause, sit outside, and consider, is there a place in your life where a relationship is in need of repair? A place that either you have been hurt or maybe where you have hurt someone else, that you feel there is a way forward that just hasn't been named. To reflect on these things and consider what healing that wound would look like. What would it take to heal that wound and bring about the indemnification that I was talking about. And after that reflection, consider picking up the phone, writing a letter, reaching out and offering the olive branch of restoration. We need each other. We need other people. And the world needs more healing. And that healing has to start somewhere. Perhaps it can start here, with us, with each other, with the members of this church, with our families and friends, with the members of the larger community, and from these local places, ripple out into the world. Perhaps that is how true justice will be achieved. That we as a people of faith will be able to do our part to bend the arc of the universe toward justice, to the glory of life.
I got a brother living out nowhere, doing what he likes to do. People making rules, but my brother, he don't care. He's a rebel through and through. The man wants nothing but freedom. Nothing but freedom. My other brother wanna change the world, and naturally he's always right. Marching around with his mouth unfurled, itching for a straight up fight. He says it's all about justice. All about justice. Well, let me tell you what, nothing but freedom leads to nothing but freedom. All about justice makes it all about justice. Freedom only wants to have its own way, and justice says you've got to do what I say. And neither brother's bound to budge, and so they duke it out every blessed day. That's how they threw away freedom and justice. And justice and freedom, both stubborn as a mischief, vinegar and piss, not listening to anything of foolish pride. Them fellas are mistaken if they think they'll cross a lake by paddling the boat to just one side. And nothing but freedom leads to nothing but freedom. And all about justice makes it all about justice. Freedom says it's all about me and mine, and justice never cares to even ask why. If they can stand there touching noses for a week, they'll never see eye to eye. That's how they crucify freedom and justice. Justice and freedom. Freedom and justice. Justice and freedom. I got a brother living out nowhere, doing what he likes.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
Our service has ended, but our service to one another and the world begins anew. May we be inspired to go forth and to seek to be people who are committed to the restoration of justice in small and large ways. May it be so.